Perfect. Good evening, everybody. My name is Sharon Logan, and I'm the Neighborhood Services Director at the Indianapolis Neighborhood Resource Center. We really appreciate all of you registering and showing up to our info session for the month of July. We will record the session, so if you want to refer to it later or share it with another neighbor, we will have that, and I'll send the link after the session is over. So we want to hop on and get started, though, because we do have a lot to talk about, and we want to make sure to save time for any questions that you all have as well. So first wanted to welcome you all to our info session on long range and current planning. We're really excited to have some staff from DMD, the Department of Metropolitan Development, join us this evening. We're going to start out with talking about long range planning, and then we'll shift into current planning, and then finish up with kind of some resources and ways to get involved. So I'll do very brief introductions of the staff that are here from DMD, and then I will hand the mic over. So Britt Red is the principal planner for land use strategy and does long range planning. So Britt will be talking with us around the long range planning overview. And then Marlene Ireta is the senior planner for Department of Metropolitan Development, City of Indianapolis. And then we have Jeff York, who's the principal planner, Regional Center Division of Current Planning. So I'm really excited to have them, volunteer their time to share information and connect with all of you. So I will mute myself, keep an eye on the waiting room. I'll also help with the chat, and we'll make sure to have time for questions at the end as well. And I think I'm handing it over to Britt. Is that right?
Yep, we have some slides. If you could share screens with Marlene, or allow Marlene to share screen.
Oh. We had the share screen for a second, and then it disappeared.
I was on the wrong slide. I apologize.
Oh, okay.
I'm sharing right now. There you are.
Awesome. Thank you. As Sharon already mentioned, we're with the Department of Metropolitan Development. I'm Brittany, and I'm here. I'm Britt, and I'm joined with my colleagues, Marlene and Jeff. You can go ahead and go to the other slide. So we're going to kick this off with an activity. We're going to show you a few aerial photographs of 3 different areas. We want you to take a look at the details of each of these neighborhoods and see if you can answer the following questions. What do people do here? How do people get around? How comfortable would you be walking, driving a car, driving a semi-truck, biking, or taking public transit in this community? And how can you tell which roads are busier? And I'm going to go ahead and drop those questions in the chat just in case you forget what they are. All right, Marlene, you can go to the next slide. All right, so this is our first neighborhood. Does anybody have an idea of what people would do in this neighborhood? And you can kind of take a look at the streets. Feel free to like unmute yourselves or drop your ideas in the chat. Take a look at the roads, the buildings, how the buildings are laid out. Same thing with the roads.
Drive a lot.
Yep, drive a lot. Why do you say that?
I mean, big, fast, wide roads and not a lot of infrastructure for people, just cars.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so what kind of vehicle do you think would feel really comfortable or You think pedestrians would feel comfortable around here?
Mm-mm.
No, I
No,
guess
no.
I'm assuming that's probably for the same reason, because all of these streets, can you tell, what people, maybe some of the land uses? Like
Well,
what would people do here besides drive?
There's a residential community in the bottom corner and they can't get anywhere by
Right.
foot.
Yeah, I can see that. And what makes you say that this is a residential community?
With the density of houses in the lower left corner.
A lot of houses.
But
maybe,
they're very hemmed in by the roads.
yeah. So I think that housing area probably represents maybe less than a quarter of the neighborhood. What else do you think is happening over here in this neighborhood? Those buildings have to be for something.
Corner looks like a hospital or a school or some kind of larger administrative type of building.
Large buildings, maybe that one in the upper left corner, maybe that's kind of school, hospital, something like that, just the way that the building's laid out. A lot of parking. Maybe these are big box stores. So there's like a sea of parking throughout this neighborhood. So I imagine that semi trucks would probably get around here pretty easily, and maybe not so much pedestrians as the first person said. Let's go to the next neighborhood. All right, same questions for this one. What do you think people do here? How do they get around?
Looks like a lot of people live there. A lot of houses, neighborhood, residential.
Okay.
They
Also,
probably
I have
lots of walking,
the chat
biking, and
box.
walking their dogs.
Yep. Okay. Personal residences, car, vehicle. I'm reading through the chat. Live and perhaps shop, walk, bike, a lot of green space. Safe feeling, that's important. More walking or biking. Connect to transit. Yeah, that's accurate. I think this is probably the neighborhood that most people are familiar with, probably because you may live in a community like this. Let's go to the next one. Same questions.
That looks kind of like one of the newer neighborhoods that don't really have a whole lot of ins and outs.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I can see that.
And all the houses kind of look the same.
Well, actually, it looks to me like you have maybe possibly two different or a little bit different social classes. The more
say a little bit more about that.
The more dense housing is on the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And so that suggests people with less money to spend on houses than above.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So probably you said spend more money on houses, probably because these are bigger houses, more land surrounding those houses, probably owned by that property owner. Mm-hmm. Someone said in the chat, curvature of street causes us to meander and spend time, but it looks more vehicular. Walk in the neighborhoods only to close parks, difficult to to connect to larger community by foot or bike. For the person that said difficult to commute by foot or bike, can you explain why you said that?
Sure. Just, I mean, I do see there is like a a sidewalk or some kind of path along that like major kind of arterial road through the middle. But like if you lived in the south side of it and wanted to connect up to the north side, you know, it might be intimidating for folks to want to walk across that or bike across that is all. I mean, it's not impossible, but maybe unlikely.
For sure, for sure. Thank you for that. Oh,
If I was a planner, I would be worried about that major street going horizontally because it's a real boundary marker between upper class and lower classes. We have that in our neighborhood, and it worries me there.
Yeah, I can see that being kind of represented. Like I can see that these areas are not from Indianapolis. They're actually from Denver. But I can kind of see the same layout or imagine the same layout in certain parts of Indianapolis. When we speak a lot about a particular street that divides basis on class and maybe even race.
The other thing I would note really quickly, sorry, Britt, to interrupt,
you're fine.
is that again, that east-west arterial or whatever, you know, it's not like on a city block grid or anything like that. So if you were a pedestrian on one side, it's going to take you forever, you know, to get to where there might be a decent crossing, but I also don't see any like visibly painted crosswalks, or maybe there's one in that one section. So it's just not, you know, made for people.
Yeah,
it looks made for cars.
Yeah, probably if you're trying to get to either side, you're probably dodging a lot of traffic and maybe not so safe. Okay, so this is an activity that we do for people who are really unfamiliar with city planning, to get them to think about how they look at the city. Basically, when you look around you, the streets, the buildings, the spaces between them, virtually everything you see has been designed and shaped by city planning. Planners help determine where buildings can be located and what type of infrastructure is needed. You can go to the next couple slides, Marlene. Yeah, so I think a great analogy would be like city planning is kind of like baking. You can go to the next one. If you think about a cake, baking a cake, you have the ingredients, you need a recipe, and the ingredients might include milk, eggs, flour, sugar, baking soda. But it's also essential to have information like measurements, cook time, baking temperature, all of those in order to come up with what we hope to be a really delicious cake. If not, if you just like throw those ingredients together without any consideration of your method or you know, way of doing that, then you'll probably end up with like a mess. You can go to the next couple slides, Melanie. And that's the same for a thriving community. A thriving community will include, you know, single family homes, apartments, schools, offices, parks, small shops, roads, grocery stores. And each of these different land uses are really important, but we know that neighborhoods aren't identical. Neighborhoods have different histories, different land uses existing, and have different infrastructure needs. That's where urban planning comes in. To the next slide. So in Indianapolis, there are two divisions of planning, as Sharon mentioned earlier, long range and current planning. I work on the long range team. Our work is aspirational and future oriented. Our team is responsible for the comprehensive plan, which is our long-term vision for Indianapolis and Marion County. We think about what do we want our city to look and feel like in 15 or 20 years into the future. We can go to the next slide. You can kind of think of the comprehensive plan like a book with different chapters. So we have the vision and values, land use, transportation, parks, housing, resiliency, and specific areas. And they come together to, provide you with some guidance for getting to the future that you envision. Go to the next slide. So I am responsible for maintaining and updating the land use plan, and it plays a really important role in the vision for our future. It establishes a classification system for the different neighborhood types. Let me go to the next slide, Marlene. So there are two different elements of the land use plan. The pattern book, which outlines different neighborhood types and land use recommendations for each one of those. And then you have the land use map, which basically identifies where those neighborhood types are throughout the city, county. Go to the next slide. So this is an example of how this could play out. So we looked at neighborhood 2. We said this is an area where a lot of people live. So we have to keep that in mind when we're planning for the future. Go to the next slide. So the land use plan would probably describe this type of community as a traditional neighborhood. So schools are included in the list of recommendations of land uses. However, there are conditions for schools in this type of neighborhood. For instance, they should not be within 1,000 feet of a highway, and they should be located along an arterial or collector street. So those are like larger streets. And I want to pose a question to you all. Do you have an idea why that would be? Why those two conditions would be included in the recommendations for that land use for schools in that neighborhood?
So that buses can get in and out?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely the second one. You need streets wide enough to accommodate buses. What else?
I would think that maybe also to avoid traffic jams, because people will be getting up and going to work if it's a very, very residential place. And they need major arteries here and there to get to wherever their work is located, or at least to the other side of town or wherever it would be.
Absolutely. For folks that live kind of the city center, you might have experience, like if you live near like Shortridge or Heron, like around 3:30 in the afternoon during the weekday, like the traffic is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like where I live, they reroute the traffic to like Delaware, which is an arterial street, just because the traffic gets kind of out of hand if a school is located in a highly residential area. So absolutely. What about, someone said child safety? Absolutely. What about the first one? Within 1,000 feet, not located within 1,000 feet of a highway.
Could it possibly be because of noise and safety factors?
Noise, safety.
Noise, and also toxic emissions.
Exactly. Yep. Both of those. So one of the things that we consider in the land use plan, one of our priorities is health and safety. So children are more impacted by pollution in the air. It can cause developmental problems. So we definitely don't want those schools to be located near highway or expressway, anything like that. So that's exactly what why that's in the land use plan. So that pretty much sums up, gives you an idea what long range planning does and how it applies to day-to-day
It's a
getting
fun
around the
time,
neighborhoods.
It's a fun time. But you know what?
I'll go ahead and pass it over to the current planner to talk a little bit about what current planning is.
Hello, everyone. Marlene is who I am. So as Britt mentioned, current planning is about the here and now. What we see today and actually what will come tomorrow. Our projects are quick. They're within like 6 months that we review them. They're up within the next 3 to 5 years. So when you see these orange public hearing signs, that's notifying the public in general that there's going to be changes to the property. So if you do have any concerns or just want to know what's going on, our office number is on there, I believe, but you can also just contact us via email as well. So just keep an eye out for these if you're interested. Hoping that I go back and forth. Okay, so as Brett mentioned, there is the comprehensive plan, land use plan, and then there's zoning. So the vision for Indianapolis is the comprehensive plan, and that's ideally what we use to dictate and review any zoning petitions that we review, whereas zoning is the actual regulations that we follow, because we can't just build whatever, wherever. There are restrictions. So those are the items that we look and take into consideration when whenever we see any project come our way. So still here saying that it's for the built environment. It focuses on anything really related to the property as far as setbacks, landscaping, height, parking, etc. We deal with it all. And these zoning regulations or rules is what we follow, and not enable us to act on the vision of the plan for the city. So we do have a zoning map. I don't know if many of you are familiar with our online MapIndy website, but it is a great resource. If you just go on there, put in an address, there is a zoning map that specifically shows every single zoning district throughout Marion County. And then it'll actually be really beneficial for you all to know why something is built next to some other use. So if you ever had that question of like, well, why is this, I don't know, business right next to this house? Probably because the zoning districts are split right in the middle. And then we have our consolidated zoning and subdivision ordinance that we actually update quite regularly, and it's pretty impressive. We've had a number of changes just since 2016, and it hasn't been that long. Our most recent update was here in I want to say 2022, but maybe one here in 23. No, it was here in 23 in May. So the zoning map itself does call out residential districts, industrial districts, schools, hospitals, parks, and all of that. And we do maintain that in our electronic mapping system, as I mentioned, MapIndy. So hopefully you all can take a look at that. If you're not already familiar with it, we'll provide you the links to that as well. So these rules that we have in play, again, help protect the general public from things that we honestly don't even consider. Like it was mentioned, emissions from cars, trafficking, noise, safety for pedestrians. These are the kind of things that we take into account based on where parking spaces can be, where landscaping should be proposed, and then even instances such like environmental, such as floodplains. We have woodlands, we have wetlands, and we have streams that we're trying to protect as well. So we've integrated those rules to help enable the protection of these areas that we would like to see continue thriving here in the future. I do want to ask you all, I don't think I'll be able to check the chat only because I'm running this PowerPoint, but what specifically do the rules talk about? I'm going to give you an example. Let me make sure if it's this slide or the next slide. Okay, so in this slide, I'll specifically ask what aspect of this image do you think is important when at least we look at it as planners? You can put in your comments in chat, and hopefully Britt or Jeff can let me know any responses that are coming through. Specifically note what it is that we're trying to identify when looking at new developments.
Someone said setbacks and use.
Correct. So this one is showing it's a store. It is a 2-story store facing the street. And you're right, the setback does dictate where those trees are going to be, where the sidewalk is, where the building footprint is going to be encroaching on.
The parking area.
Right, correct. We have the parking area on the side. We don't necessarily always want it in the front, again, to protect pedestrians from getting into accidents or even bicyclists. We have, I think, 2 bike spaces right there.
That there even is greenery. I'm assuming those little pink circles are trees in the front.
Correct. We do regulate those landscaping requirements to ensure that we have buffers, that we have our at least provide some type of relief from just building and concrete and anything else really. But yes, green space, trees, that is also what we would take a look at. I'm going to go to the next one and then show you 2 differences. The one on the left is one that we've been discussing, and then on the one on the right is really where it could be in place right now, but it was in an instance where really anything could have gone. Over time, we do update our standards to ensure that we have better development throughout the city. So in this instance, at one point, you could have driven straight onto the property, parked right in front of the building, and then everything was good. But we didn't have any sidewalks. We didn't have any landscaping. We weren't ensuring that the public was going to be safe while trying to access this store. Same as the pole sign there. It's awfully tall and doesn't necessarily need to be right at that corner. And then again, there are downsides. I mean, there is the history of zoning that has been used for discriminatory and exclusionary purposes. There are instances where it's too rigid and prevents innovation. And then that it also works for individual parcels, but it does not work well with tying places together. But as I've mentioned, over time with changes and information, research that's conducted, or even insight from residents when there's community outreach programs, we try to get feedback from the public. Those items come into play whenever we try to update our ordinance and really have it be an all-encompassing vision for everyone. And then here, sometimes, I mean, what's next door? Let's say if it's an industrial building, if it's closed down and then it's empty for a significant amount of time, sometimes someone might want to take that on and then redevelop it, tear it down, or repurpose that building. And in those instances, if it's or at least recommended in our comprehensive plan, the vision for our city, then we can support those changes. But otherwise, there are instances where it just doesn't make sense, and we would recommend denial, but it's based on the deciding bodies that are hearing these petitions. So for example, we have variance of use and variance of development standards. The variance of use is honestly just keeping the zoning district, let's say it's residential, but someone wants to have an office and they get a variance of use for that office. Sometimes if it's along a corridor that already has offices, or if it's along a bus rapid transit line that will eventually turn into more commercial uses, in those instances, it makes sense to have that variance. But if it's right in the middle of a suburban neighborhood, there's no need for that office there. We need our housing stock to remain, so we would recommend denial in those instances. Variance of development standards are when someone wants to change the number of trees. They want to not put in sidewalks for some reason. They want to increase the number of parking spaces, or have a building that's maybe a story taller than what would have already been allowed. In those instances, again, we do take into context what the neighborhood already looks like, what vision we want to see. The comprehensive plan does say what uses are allowed, and then we have a number of other plans, such as the transit-oriented development overlays that dictate what new uses and what new projects can come into play. But we also have a rezoning petition that ultimately changes the use of the property forever. So in those instances, it's more like there was once a commercial site and it's no longer being utilized, or if it was vacant and was never built. And then someone wants to put in some residential development, such as apartments. If they're already near other residences and the comprehensive plan also agrees, then we would support that. Otherwise, we do make recommendations to these deciding bodies to approve or deny them. This is just the process for at least specifically rezoning. You would file, or someone would file, we would prepare a report with our recommendation. The hearing body would vote on the matter, and then it would be adopted, by the city county council if it's a rezone petition. And then when those changes do occur, they're changed for future projects. There are new rules that they can be in place for any number of years, and then they can always change, but it just depends on what new vision is in place, or what the property owner developer wants to see there. And then normally when there's existing structures or buildings that don't meet those standards, like this store here, those are considered legally non-conforming, and they can remain as is so long as they don't expand it or do any changes with it. And there are exceptions to anything that's currently here. But the general rule is that once some new development comes into place today, then they would follow the 2023 zoning ordinance standards. And I believe I'm going to pass it off to Jeff here. Yes.
Thank you, Marlene. This is Jeff, and I handle regional center cases, which are design review of the downtown area, but outside of historic districts. That is what I've been doing for a number of years. I also handle plat petitions. I'm going to talk a little more about plat petitions, and then we'll go with into other types of petitions that we handle. By the way, Marlene and I and our staff, current planning, we handle about 1,000 petitions per year, and that is obviously a significant number. So just wanted you to understand that there's just a high volume that we do handle. But this website on the screen gives a wealth of information of not just of current planning, but long range, and also the department as a whole. And Marlene, if you want to go ahead and click on browse, the browse button there, browse services and information. Like it's indicated with the land use petition forms and fees, that is a link that you will see where you would be able to review the all the different types of petitions that we handle. And that is anything from an approval petition, as you see there, for a hospital district, and also for rezoning petitions and variance petitions. We have two types of variances. One is a variance of development standards, which is like a setback or a building height variance. And then a use, as we indicated earlier, could be a use not permitted in a particular zone that they wish to file a variance of use to add that particular use in that on that particular property. So plat petitions are subdivision plats, and Britt had a couple of really good examples of what a subdivision or subdivisions would look like in the area photos that were shown early on. And a plat petition is simply dividing the land into smaller parcels so they can be sold and then built on. And that is one of the parts of current planning that we handle. And those types of petitions are ones where you have to meet, but the resulting parcel would have to meet the zoning district as far as the lot size and things of that nature. We also require sidewalks that are, for subdivisions that are major subdivisions. That would be 3 lots or more, or excuse me, 4 lots or more, requires sidewalks, in all those subdivisions. And the developer is required to put those in. It had to meet certain standards. So those are plat petitions that Marlene has shown there. For regional center, which is, again, what I handle, and I've been doing that for a number of years, and I enjoy it immensely, is a design review for new buildings, actually anything from a new house to signage to a new structure that is being built in the downtown, again, outside of historic districts. So regional center has 2 types of petitions. That would be low impact. That would be like a sign. Would be a low impact. That's a staff review. Or high impact, where it would be like for a new hotel, for example. So the high impact cases are ones where you need a public hearing to be able to have a public review for that type of petition. One of the things we did a number of years ago that we didn't have was that demolitions of structures prior to 2008 did not require review in the regional center. And we lost a lot of buildings prior to that year. And since then, they need a thorough review by our staff in order to either approve or we say no, and you've got to reuse that building. So that's a type of thing that we have been doing since 2008, a new responsibility, and one that we believe have saved a number of buildings for us. So that is a really good thing. Another item to note is when there is a property that is rezoned, there will be likely a list of commitments, and that would be commitments that are developed through conversations with the neighborhood and also with the staff. And those types of commitments can include a commitment that a site plan and building plan has to be submitted for review by the administrator, and that is it's called administrator's approval. And those types of reviews are fairly new over the last several years, where if there is a particular type of design that was thought of at the time of the zoning, then we take a really close look at what is being proposed at the time they're ready to develop the site. And so we'll review that zoning petition and the information to make sure that what is being proposed is in line with what was thought of at the time. So that is an administrator's approval design there. There's a question in the chat about when sidewalk requirements are waived and commitments legally binding. Well, commitments are legally binding when they are recorded and become part of the rezoning petition. If there is a sidewalk waiver, that is one where it has to have a public review through not only our staff makes a recommendation if that should be approved or denied, but the board would have to make an action on that review. So that we typically do not support sidewalk waivers, and we are really strict from our recommendation on what sidewalks should be installed with that. So I think that we can go on with the how to get involved with planning, Marlene. That, and I think I'll talk a little bit about that if you don't mind. So yeah, go with that. So I'll just start off with this, that whenever you see the orange sign or you get a legal notice in the mail, you have an opportunity to contact the petitioner and staff, and our information is on that legal notice. But you also have the right to attend the hearing, and this diagram here shows what that would look like. The petitioner and the remonstrators have the ability to speak at the hearing about the petition, their side of the petition. Our city staff, we provide an objective review of this, and it's a professional planning opinion. And it's based on our land use plan that Britt handles. We hold that in high regard as far as making a recommendation with our staff reports and particular petitions. Then the hearing outcome is decided by, again, variances by the Board of Zoning Appeals, and then our Metropolitan Development Commission and City County Council for rezoning or zoning hearings. And then we have other hearing examiners for design review and for smaller, what we call variance hearings, or what we call hearing officer variance, we have a hearing officer for that. So Marlene, I'll go ahead and turn that back to you. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll just go to the next slide. So generally each hearing type and hearing body has different rules. One has 15, one has 20, but the example here, it's really the same formatting. They call the case, the people who are wanting to speak on the petition are sworn in. Generally, they're supposed to meet the findings of fact specifically for those cases, and that's really what should dictate the ruling on the matter. But there are instances where the public feels really strongly for or against something, and those do come into play when the decision is factored in. But generally, petitioner is given 15 minutes, remonstrance is given 15 minutes. Staff is actually should be number 6, but we do present as well, stating what the city's concerns or support is on the matter. And then again, 5 minutes for the petitioner to state their rebuttal, and then 5 minutes for the remonstrators as well. This is done in a orderly fashion so that everyone can be heard. There's no one speaking over each other, and there's really no time for discussions or shouting. The body members really hone in on being respectful to everyone and have it be a really generally good process for everyone. And then I believe Britt can touch on how to get involved further.
Yeah, so in 2017, we created a training, People's Planning Academy, and it was our way of kind of democratizing city planning. I think prior to 2017, we noticed that the people who were participating in various planning processes weren't representative of our community. And we thought that civic education could help with that. So if you understand processes, how they work, how you can advocate for yourself, then you're more likely to actually participate in those processes. So we've held the academy 3 years. This will be our 4th year, and we're going to open applications in August to participate in this year's People's Planning Academy. But yeah, I think it's a great way to get people involved and, you know, to share information so we don't get the same folks coming to our meetings, or not just meetings, but participating in overall processes. So be on the lookout for that. Also, we have educational videos, one of them featuring Marlene, explaining how zoning works and how you can like use our map, interactive maps. So if you look on the DMD Communications YouTube page, there are the People's Planning Academy educational videos that you can check out. Also, if you really want to take a deep dive into how planning works in Indiana, there's the Indiana Citizen Planners Guide, and it has a lot of in the weeds details about how planning works, from how the commission works to like ethics and rules of procedure and all those details. And you can find that on the APA Indiana website. It's indianaplanning.org. And that's all I had. Did you want to go to questions? Is it time for questions? Oh, sorry. Marlene, did you want to talk about? Oh, I think that was just local officials. You can also use your local officials as resources to get information about what's happening, get involved.
But yes, as Britt mentioned, that round that sums up our presentation. We're open for questions from you all. I think I'll stop sharing this. Well, wait, I'll share our last slide only because it has our information. I'm sure you'll receive it from Sharon as well. But if you want to screenshot it or take a photo of it, this is our contact information. But I'll give you a minute, or maybe like a few seconds. A minute's quite a long time. And then I'll just stop sharing this. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so we do have time for any questions that anyone has as it relates to planning, long range, current planning, as they talk about zoning, any of that anyone wants to ask. You feel free to come off mute and ask your question. If you would prefer to put it in chat, we can also man the chat, but we may ask you to come off mute and clarify something that you write in chat.
I have a question about heritage trees. Is there any recognition of heritage trees in the zoning process?
Yes, there is. We have in our ordinance, there's information about what a heritage tree is and what it, there's regulations on they're to be kept, obviously, and you know what the diameter is. So yeah, that's in our ordinance and they are protected. If there is a potential for those to be cut down, then there's regulations on what needs to be done in order for that to occur. But that is regulated in our ordinance. And prior to 2016, that was not the case.
Is there an enforcement provision with that?
Yes, I mean, our ordinance is enforced by Department of Business and Neighborhood Services.
Yeah.
I'll also add that the land use plan does identify the environmentally sensitive areas of the county, and some of those receive those designations because of the tree canopy in general. It doesn't specify if it's heritage trees or not, just if it's has a significant amount of tree canopy, that then it should either be preserved or there's recommendations for replacements.
Okay.
There's a question, I don't know, Jeff or Marlene, there's a question about, do petitions application ask if there are fees due to violations or citations?
I can touch on that. Are you asking that if there's a violation, are there fees associated to that? Or when they apply for variances, are there fees associated to their application process?
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me.
I can.
Oh, I guess my question is, when the applicant applies, we see a lot of times in our neighborhood, applicants are only applying because they currently have outstanding dues because they've received violations or citations. I didn't know if that was part of the application process to kind of give a bigger picture if that's not asked.
So generally, yes, we do have a separate department, Department of Business and Neighborhood Services, who has the authority to enforce our zoning ordinance. So in those instances, when there's a violation, typically a zoning violation, there are fees associated to that for that property owner, but then they're also required to make the correction. So the correction would either be to remove what was built or put in place, or file for a variance of use, development standards, or potentially rezone, whatever the case may be. But there are fees associated to their violations, not necessarily citations. I think citations are their warnings, but once it becomes a violation, there are fees associated to those. And then when they file for their application process with us, there are fees associated to those applications as well.
Thank you.
Oh, and I did want to mention that the Department of Business and Neighborhood Services is more reactive to complaints filed through the Mayor's Action Center. There's not as many personnel in order for them to be proactively searching for violations. So if you happen across something, you can call that in. If you have concerns about that, you can call that in and contact the Mayor's Action Center for that to be addressed.
Hello. I just want to say thank you to your, to you guys for coming and doing this type of educational outreach to the community, because I see the need for it, and a lot of people don't understand how they can get involved. And sometimes there's a lot of us that probably get to reply too much maybe, but what is it that you think, the People's Planning Academy is a great avenue to help people better understand the zoning regulations are good if you have a lot of time to read through those. Evan, I think you, with the Indiana Forest Alliance, there's a green factor in that zoning document that kind of outlines everything. But what would you like? What is your biggest need from citizens and neighborhoods, and how can we better help you as far as getting our information out to you in a better way than probably it's happening? Because I see there's a big disconnect of not getting a lot of voices out there, and maybe not giving the information in a really good way. So what could we do better? Anybody from?
Well, I'll speak on behalf of at least our hearings. We generally don't see a lot of residents attend those, mainly because they're during the work hours 1 through 5, typically during the week. But providing letters or if you have the time to have one person be a spokesperson, if you are in favor of something or opposing a petition. Sometimes we see that there could be instances where there's no one really speaking against something or for something, so it goes the opposite way. And honestly, your voice could really tip that factor. But I understand that time isn't always the best, or at least not on. Time isn't in our favor, but putting in a letter sometimes really just helps. I think when we have open public, well, we don't have them with current planning, but long range planning does. They do need public engagement, and I'll let Britt touch on that. But I think those instances, it's really important to be involved and come out.
Yeah,
I do see that. I'm so sorry, Britt. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, when it comes to updating our comprehensive plan, so the state of Indiana has a statutory requirement for community engagement, and we always work to exceed those like minimum expectations. So we try a variety of different ways to engage the community, from having like pop-up events to like posting on social media, speaking at neighborhood association meetings, that sort of thing. If you're not already following the Department of Metropolitan Development social media, I would encourage you to do that. We provide a lot of updates that way. I think we have a newsletter. I'm not 100% sure. No, I think different divisions have newsletters. I'm sorry.
I just have a question. If you have a petitioner for either a variance change or zoning change, and no one appears at the hearing to either oppose or accept the change, does the zoning board automatically approve that, or do they weigh the petitioner's request?
So it's in that instance, when there's no one from the public who comes to the hearing, it really depends. If staff is supporting it and there's no one against it that we're aware of, then there's obviously no reason to deny it. So it gets placed on an expedited portion of the docket. So those are approved because we have given our opinion on it, and then the petitioner at least has gone through the proper channels to have their request acknowledged and heard and voted on. But in instances where staff is against petitions, and then it's really just between our word and the petitioner's word and how the deciding body votes on it. So in that instance, that's why I tell people it's usually, I just tell them it's 50-50 chance. They could go with me or they could go with the applicant, but no, it's not always. The only guarantee is if staff is in support of their request. Otherwise, there is a public hearing for it.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sharon, can I share something? I know we're at 7 o'clock, but I just want to share that DMD has partnered with Parks and Recreation or Indy Parks for artists and residents opportunity. So if you know a local artist who is interested in working in local government, we're providing a $10,000 artists and residents for 6 months. They'll work as part of their work with the People's Planning Academy to curate some of the curriculum, but then also do some community engagement stuff with parks to come up with interesting ideas of what community members want to see at parks and public spaces. And here is the link to the application in English. Sharon, I can send you those. We have flyers and stuff for both Spanish and English.
Yeah, I will say I just clicked on the link that you sent, Britt, and it says that there's an error, so I'm not sure. But after this session, if there's any links, if you want to email me or the presentation, I do have the links that were in the agenda that you all sent me earlier that I will put in the email to folks as I send them the evaluation. But anything that you want me to send out, just, shoot me an email. I wanted to add also, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the registered neighborhood organizational database that the city has, I believe that if folks have their contact information up to date, those are the individuals that will be notified also of like development that's happening in the area. And so I don't know if it was Carol or who had asked, like, what can we do, right? Like, what's one step that we can do? And so I think one thing that we can do as neighborhood leaders is, if you are getting notified, if you're the contact for your neighborhood association, or someone who is, that if they get notified about something that's happening, for you to make sure that you share that out, right, on your platforms. If it's a neighborhood newsletter, if it's a neighborhood Facebook page, next door, whatever, to help get that information out in front of folks so they do know about it. Just being mindful of that. I think that's one thing that I thought about that would, be just an action item that folks can walk away with. Oh, go ahead.
No, I would say that's absolutely correct. I believe last year we went through all of the registered neighborhood organizations, and we reached out in hopes that we get a response, or at least get told, hey, we're not the contact anymore, or they close them out. But it is up to individuals to keep that information up to date, and we don't track that. So if for some reason someone drops the ball from your neighborhood organization, we don't have access to who that next contact would be. So maybe look into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say INRC, one of the things that we do to try to help keep it up to date is, if anyone applies for any of our grants, that's one of our requirements, is to go in and make sure that you're not only registered, but the information is up to date. I put the link for the registered database in the chat as well, so anyone can go in if you don't have that. And thank you, I'm going to click on that real quick.
However, just make sure that you're just not doing it as an individual, because you will get inundated with like letters and a bunch of stuff. So make sure you're representing an actual neighborhood organization.
Yeah. I just really appreciate this session. We do have time, for a few more questions if anyone wants it. We have scheduled till 7:30, but we don't have to go that long if we don't have to. But I wanted to say, like, for me, something that really resonated with the presentation was the image even that was shared. It reminded me of an old books or coffee shop. I think it was Mojo's on Michigan near IUPUI's campus, where the parking lot was exactly like that image. I was like, oh my God, that looks like that old coffee shop. And it was always so dangerous getting in and parking and not knowing how to get out. And so that was just really interesting for me to think about development and how it affects new development, but then how do buildings stay the way that they are. And so understanding like the rules of kind of being, for lack of a better term, grandfathered into, however they were developed prior. I do have a question for myself personally. I just recently went to Belmont Beach over the weekend. And when I was leaving, I think it was Belmont Avenue that I took to 10th Street. And then, so I was heading south on Belmont, I believe. And then I was turning east on 10th Street. And there are businesses that are so close to the street that you can't see down 10th Street to turn against traffic and go across. And it was really scary. And I thought, like, is there something you can do if you notice that it's a dangerous intersection? And I know someone from Health by Design was on the call, and I was just thinking about like safety, pedestrian safety, and I wasn't sure, is there anything that neighbors can do when they notice there is a development that is historically probably been there for a long time, but it clearly, when it was developed, is not necessarily safe now? Is there anything that folks can do?
I would say we'd have to look at that situation pretty closely. I don't want to say that we can. I don't want to say we can't. at this point. I think we'd have to take a close look at that. I think we all should also understand that when buildings were built, say in the 1940s or so, that streets were not as wide then as they are now. So streets have gotten larger, we've added lanes, and that has made those setbacks very small to the streets and sidewalks. So we would have to take a close look at that.
Okay, so Jeff, do you feel like it would be something where if a neighbor noticed something like that and they were, and especially if you lived over there, right? I don't live on the west side, so it's not something I have to deal with daily, but if it's something that they were really nervous about, who would they reach out to, or how would they even like get someone to look at it and to see like, is this something that could be done? And I'm not sure if the building was vacant or used. I honestly don't remember, but I just know it was literally like street sidewalk building. There was like no space to like see down the street.
Right. This really is something they could reach out to the mayor's neighborhood advocate.
Okay.
And then the advocate can speak with and contact Department of Public Works and to see, again, we're not the experts on that particular type of situation, and they are. So that would be the avenue to go. Yeah.
Perfect. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Another great resource if you're concerned about like general walkability in your community would be Health by Design. They provide resources for walk audits, which can help you advocate for your community. If you do a walk audit and you like have the data that says like these are the conditions of my neighborhood, you can, like I said, better advocate for yourself. Also, we have Indy Moves, which is our transportation integration plan, and it identifies the different transportation projects underway, and those include like sidewalks, crosswalks, multimodal paths and everything. So you can look in there to see if Department of Public Works has prioritized something in your neighborhood, and there might be a project underway, or maybe in the future that they've already identified.
Great. Anyone else have any last questions or comments before we wrap up?
I have a few more about some like trees and canopy stuff. You mentioned working with DPW. Does the zoning process, does that get shared with city agencies automatically? I assume it should, but the reason I'm asking is that Indiana Forest Alliance, we were aware of a parcel around Post Road where it was rezoned industrial, and some of the city agencies were not notified, or did they just miss it, or is it not automatically shared with the city agencies when something's rezoned?
Should be notified. So, I mean, we would have to take a look at that. If you can give us some specific information, then we will take a look at that.
Okay. Yeah, I can have someone send like a specific, I have the contact info. And then
okay.
The other thing I wanted to ask was, is the open spaces plan, is that open, available to the public now, or is that still being worked on?
Say open space plan?
Yeah, that's in conjunction with DPW related to the Full Circles Greenway plan, correct? Or am I mixing up terms here?
That's not current planning. Not current planning.
Oh,
are you referring to the pedestrian plan or greenways plan? Because there's a couple of different I'm trying to look. So there's the Greenways Full Circle Master Plan that was adopted in 2014.
Yeah, and there's the open space plan is like the public input phase for the greenways, or is the open space plan only about pedestrian safety?
I am not familiar with like that might be something that DPW is in like leading on their own.
Okay. I think there's probably a few more like really specific questions that would probably be better over emails, so you all could like look up what you need, and I have your contact info. So I think we'll do that. And thank you very much for this whole presentation. Very helpful.
Thank you.
All right, perfect. I am prepping the email to go out to everyone who registered for this info session. In it will be an evaluation link, as well as links that DMD has shared with me, including some about People's Planning Academy and the art application that Britt referred to as well. And then the recording will be uploaded to our YouTube channel and our website as well. So you'll have access to that and can refer back to it. So I appreciate everyone spending their evening with us. Thank you so much. Keep a connection to INRC and DMD. Our Facebook page is a good way to find out other things that are happening. I put that link for DMD as well. And then our next info session is next month, and we'll be working with Indianapolis Center for Conflict Resolution. So keep an eye out for that info session. Thank you so much. And thank you to DMD for spending their evening and sharing their knowledge with everyone.